Afternoon, everyone. Let us pray. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our Queen and her government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideals, but laying aside all private interests and prejudices, keep in mind the responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. Amen. Please be seated.
Introduction of visitors. Introduction of guests.
Honourable members, this Sunday is International Women's Day, and as Gloria Steinem said, the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist nor to any one organization, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights. In acknowledgement of that, it is my privilege once again to draw attention to the all-star, all-female table serving the chamber this afternoon. Honourable members, today we have two school groups visiting from Strathcona Sherwood Park. Will you please rise? The Strathcona Christian Academy students. And our second school group today is the Drumheller Stettler Lakeview Christian Junior High. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of our assembly. It might still be on the queuing.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In just a few days, the Hindu festival of Holi and the Sikh festival of Hola Mohalla will begin, and celebrations are planned around the world and at home all across Alberta over this weekend and next. Holi is also known as the Festival of Colours and is considered to be one of the most celebrated festivals in India, where it is celebrated in almost every part of the country. This ancient festival marks the end of winter and the beginning of spring. It honors the triumph of good over evil and is a time for forgiveness, mending relationships, bonding with friends and family, and a time for playing. Celebrants light bonfires, throw colorful powder, eat sweets, and dance to traditional folk music. Holi is a very carefree festival that's great fun to participate in if you don't mind getting colorful. The vibrant colors of Holi are considered to be the colors of joy, the colors of love, the colors that fill our lives with happiness. With all the beautiful colors being thrown with enthusiasm, participants should carefully consider what they're wearing to the celebration. I've had the honor of attending joyous Holi celebrations hosted by the Hindu Society of Alberta, the Alberta Hindi Parishad, the Indian Students Association at the U of A, and in my home riding of Edmonton Millwoods at the Bhartiya Cultural Society of Alberta. These events are organized by dedicated volunteers and attended by thousands of Albertans. Over the past few years, Holi has even been celebrated at Parliament and right here at the Alberta Legislature. Hola Mohalla is celebrated for 3 days and is an opportunity for Sikhs to demonstrate their martial arts skills in simulated battles. In India, Hola Mohalla has grown into a huge fair and attracts people from all over the country and the world to participate and watch. I encourage all Albertans to seek out local celebrations where possible and to join in the festivities. On behalf of the NDP caucus, I wish my constituents, Albertans, Canadians, and all of the Hindu and Sikh communities a very happy Holi and Hola Mohalla.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Southeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is distressing to see the scale of capital flight from our energy sector. Despite our partnerships with Indigenous Canadians, raising the bar on environmental standards, and our respect for human rights, oil and LNG projects are being delayed, rejected, or cancelled. Enbridge was prepared to invest $7.9 billion to build Northern Gateway, a pipeline that would have brought oil from northern Alberta to a port in Kitimat, BC. TransCanada was prepared to invest $16 billion on Energy East. It would have brought our oil to refineries in the east decreasing Canada's dependency on foreign oil. Petronas was prepared to invest $36 billion, a record amount, on the Pacific Northwest LNG project. And most recently, the $20 billion Tech Frontier mine was withdrawn. If you also include Nexon's $28 billion Aurora LNG, Exxon's $25 billion LNG, and Shell's $16 billion Prince Rupert LNG projects, the grand total reaches an astounding $150 billion in lost investments. Instead of creating jobs and wealth for Canadians, instead of funding our schools and hospitals, that capital is being invested in countries with poor environmental and human rights records. It's time for the federal government to represent Canadians and to stop stifling our world-class energy sector.
The honourable member for Lethbridge East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Everyone in Alberta deserves a safe community to live, work, and raise a family in. Creating these communities means addressing the issues that keep our friends and neighbours up at night. Since forming government in 2019, I've heard similar stories from many who make Lethbridge their home. Stories of break-and-enters, property thefts, and a lack of confidence in our downtown core. Some have accepted these crimes as the status quo. It's hard not to when Lethbridge has seen the highest increase of meth use in the province since 2012-2013, and an explosive increase in the trafficking of these drugs. I'm standing in this House today to inform every Lethbridgian that these ongoing crimes and worries will not be accepted as the new normal for Lethbridge. I was proud to stand this week with the Minister of Justice and the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions to announce landmark initiatives that will make Lethbridge a safer community for all. The expansion of the ALERT program with the addition of investigators and a drug court in Lethbridge is another promise kept by our government to Southern Alberta. ALERT combats addiction-related crime through investigating, disrupting, and dismantling gangs and criminal networks that put these kind of drugs on our streets. Opening the first drug treatment court outside of Edmonton and Calgary in Lethbridge will bring us one step closer to breaking the cycle of addictions. The truth of the matter is we cannot make these issues go away by turning a blind eye to those struggling with addictions, and we cannot let those struggling suffer in silence and without the support they need. But we can also no longer tolerate the related and compounding crimes. In addition to this announcement, a few short hours ago, the government released the findings of the Supervised Consumption Services Review Committee. These steps are absolutely necessary to getting Albertans the help they may need. I am proud of this government for being bold enough to take the steps needed for effective resolution to this issue and for recognizing and validating the experience that many constituents have shared with me. Hope and help is truly on the horizon for Lethbridge. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Edmonton Ellerslie is a diverse, engaged, and rapidly growing community. A community with young families who are raising their children and hope for them to have a good education. Sadly, it's also a community being left behind by this government. Investment to infrastructure for schools is down almost $200 million in this budget, guaranteeing that young families in Edmonton Ellerslie's desperate need for a high school to support their growing families is probably going to go unheard. Parents also tell me that their children come home frustrated because their classrooms are too crowded. And with the new education funding model, which will not be able to keep funding with growth, we're not going to be able to see for Edmonton schools. Parents of special needs children who have the added experience of worrying for their children being left behind in our public system due to the PUF funding cuts. These families will now have to provide additional support resources for their children from K-12 on top of facing higher taxes and school fees. Parents tell me how life is becoming more unaffordable since this government decided to give away $4.7 billion to profitable corporations and are now balancing the budget on the backs of the working families like theirs. Parents tell me that they have a hard time making ends meet because of the sudden increases to their child's school bus fees. Each child in our province should be afforded equal opportunities to succeed, Madam Speaker. And handing down astronomical cuts to education is not the way that we invest in the success of our future generations. They deserve better, and we owe them better. But if the education system continues to go under attack as it is now by this government, then my colleagues and I have a long fight ahead of us.
The honourable member for Drayton Valley, Devon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are times as an MLA when I'm at a loss for words. when the events that surround a particular issue are so bizarre that I cannot figure out how to accurately articulate my anger, disbelief, and confusion. The events surrounding the Tech Frontier mine decision fit into that category. So I figured that today, rather than trying to express my concern over the intrusions of the Liberal government in Ottawa and its death by delay tactics, I would let others do the talking for me. Rex Murphy is one of Canada's most esteemed political commentators. His observations are astute, balanced, and always articulate. In a National Post article on February the 24th, Rex Murphy wrote, quote, "If one were to assemble a group of the most insidiously devious minds that this world has spawned, the Professor Moriartys and the Lex Luthors of the world, and ask them to devise the surest way to snap the bonds of Canadian Confederation, disenchant and alienate an entirely productive region of the country, paralyze the nation's transportation system, and while they were at it, deepen the rift with Canada's Indigenous citizens, they'd report back in a heartbeat, sorry, we can't come up with anything that beats what you've already got, the present Trudeau government." Again, he says, "Rarely, if ever, has folly been granted such total reign, and incompetence a wider playground." Yet later he says, "We don't have a government in Ottawa, we have an Instagram page with executive authority." And finally he says, "It is led by a dilettante play-acting the part of the Prime Minister. The events of recent days show him palpably fading in authority, presence, and capacity. Sometimes you have to let others speak on your behalf. He is right, and if the Prime Minister of Canada, his cabinet, and the caucus are left unchecked, they will threaten the very social, economic, and national foundation."
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
International Women's Day is an opportunity to celebrate the acts of courage and determination by those who've worked tirelessly to advance gender equality in their communities. This day traces back to the labour movements of the early 20th century. Bold working women and men led a growing push for women to participate equally in society. Often on days like this, we think of famous women or politicians or of historic heroes. But to me, International Women's Day is about everyday women, women in our community, those women in our lives who inspire us, who speak up, who bring us together, who fight for justice. This year's theme is Because of You, because ultimately it takes ordinary women and men and non-binary folks coming together through collective action to achieve gender equality. Because of the long struggle of suffragettes, women started to gain the right to vote, to have a seat at the table, and to be here speaking in this legislature. Because of those who marched before us, women saw movement towards having the control to make choices over their own bodies. Because of postal workers who went on strike to demand better, women in Canada began to have access to maternity leave. Because of the brave Indigenous women who would not be silenced, we saw a federal inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and 231 calls for justice. Because of the courageous women willing to share their stories and say, "Me too," we are finally starting to have a societal conversation and action on harassment and violence against women. On days like these, the UCP will put out feel-good statements to mark the day, but it's their actions for the other days of the year for which they should be judged. And ultimately, their actions come up short. In fact, they're taking us backwards, and Alberta women are paying the price. But it's on us to demand better. Demand that this UCP government tackle domestic violence, implement universal childcare, support healthcare for women and gender-diverse Albertans. Demand that they act on pay equity. Demand that they work to finally see economic justice for women in Alberta. Because frankly, Alberta women are done waiting. The time to act is now. So, happy International Women's Day. Let's get to work. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and happy International Women's Day. As our legislation and policies from the previous session take hold, I have observed there have been three distinct categories of people who have formed: the doers, disruptors, and the do-nothings. The majority of people I meet are doers. They're the folks who go work hard every day, head to work, go to school, provide for their families, and volunteer their time. They work hard to ensure that they contribute more than what is expected of them. At the opposite end of the spectrum are the disruptors. They complain, cause havoc, feed off the negative, and strive to drag others down with them. The most dangerous disruptors seem like they're doers, but really, they just want others to disrupt while they watch the sparks fly. I've discovered that when you implement change, the disruptors get very loud and resort to name-calling and other off-putting behavior. When they see others getting ahead from hard work, they want to cry foul about fairness. I know where the old adage of cutting off your nose to spite your face comes from, Madam Speaker. The do-nothing crowd cares not, does not think they are affected by the world around them, or they cannot make a difference any longer. I'm disheartened when I hear the stories from folks who have worked hard, tried their best, but have had a bad break, or watch the protesters robbing their hope and livelihood because of illegal blockades being tolerated. Currently, disruptors would see our energy stay in the ground, end cattle farming, all in the name of the environment. Know this, illegal blockades, trespassing on farms will not be tolerated. Hijacking another's cause or concern to twist it for your own is not acceptable. You will not cripple our economy. You will not make us weak. To the disruptors, we're on to your tactics. So fasten up your chin straps, buckle up. We're driving on to ensure a fair deal in our country and our economy to get it rolling again. We're rallying to the flag in a common cause. Albertans are standing together, strong and free.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to stand today and recognize the efforts this government is making to make lives easier for Albertans. In August, the Minister of Service Alberta spent weeks visiting mobile home sites across Alberta. In West Yellowhead, he came to both Edson and Hinton, where he heard from mobile home site residents. Many of these residents have felt voiceless for far too long. When it came to disputes between tenants and landlords, they were required to bring it to courts, where they would spend more time and money than other types of renters and landlords. To file an application with the courts, it could cost up to $200 and could take several months. My constituents had grown frustrated. Last week, the Minister of Service Alberta announced that our government will be tabling Bill 3, the Mobile Home Sites Tenancies Amendment Act. This bill proposes amendments to the existing MHSTA that, if passed, will give landlords and tenants the ability to file applications for remedies of up to $50,000 through the Residential Tenancy Dispute Resolution Services, or RTDRS. This will give mobile home site tenants and landlords the same rights and process as tenants and landlords in houses, condos, and apartments. Urgent RTDRS disputes are heard within 25 days, and the application fee is only $75. This fee can also be waived if it were to cause financial hardship to the applicant. While this is a clear example of a government listening to Albertans, it will not stop here. The Minister has made it clear that beyond this immediate change, our government will continue consulting Albertans in mobile home communities on other issues they face that may not be able to be addressed through the RTDRS. While we have taken a very good first step, for me, it is simply step one. I will continue to do what I can to ensure that my constituents know they are voiceless no longer.
In advance of International Women's Day, I am honored to rise in this House today to speak again about Grande Prairie's own rising country music artist, Tenille Townes. Not only is she an amazing artist, strong female leader in our community, she is also someone for young girls to look up to. As I've mentioned before in this House, Tenille shows poise and grace, and she swept the podium in the 2019 Canadian Country Music Association Awards, taking home all 4 awards for which she was nominated. Not only was she awarded Female Country Artist of the Year, she was also recognized for her amazing songwriting ability, particularly for her song, Somebody's Daughter. Later this week, as we celebrate International Women's Day, I look to this new generation of female leaders like Tenille, who famously sang, "Bet she was somebody's best friend, laughin', back when she was somebody's sister, counting change at the lemonade stand, dancing in a gym where the kids all talk about their someday plans." I ask all members of this House, and through you, Madam Speaker, that all Albertans remember the importance of women and their someday plans, and treat them with the dignity and respect we would show to our own daughters. When I think about my daughter Isabel and her wonderful friends, I look forward to the bright future she has in Alberta with strong female role models like Tenille Townes and the women in this very chamber, women who lead by example and inspire our daughters to do the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and may I take this opportunity to show my appreciation and thank this House for having a strong female speaker sit over these proceedings today. Thank you.
Flattery will get you everywhere with this, Madam Speaker. But now we are at oral question period. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To say this Premier has trouble keeping his story straight is putting it lightly. The truth is, he talks about 2.5% cuts in this House, but when he's alone with his Conservative friends and insiders, he loves to brag about his 14% cut for every man, woman and child in Alberta. On Tuesday, 14, on Wednesday, 2.5. For the Premier, is this wild variation in his story the result of an inherent honesty deficit, or is it that he just doesn't know the answer?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome the NDP leader back from Ottawa, and I'd also like to celebrate the success at the Supreme Court of Canada today, which refused to hear the appeal on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. It will proceed. With respect to the budget, Madam Speaker, this is not a question for debate. It's numbers. They are objective. They're undeniable. Last year's spending under the NDP, $48.4 billion, and in the out year of this government's fiscal plan, $47.4 billion. That's just over 2% on a $50 billion budget, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you. I guess this is a 2.4% day, but the 14% is backed by U of C economists who describes 8.4 Claude from social services, 13.7 from healthcare, and 19.6 from education and post-secondaries. Now, they called it fear and smear when we warned Albertans of 20% cuts. My bad. In education, it was just 19.6. Premier, why did your party lie about these draconian cuts in the last election instead of admitting just how much your $4.7 billion corporate handout was going to cost Albertans?
A lot. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, and it's nice to see you in the chair today. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader is reinforcing why she was fired by Albertans for her total fiscal incompetence. The truth is that, Madam Speaker, we have by far the highest program expenditures in Canada on a per-person basis, about 20% more than the average amongst Canadian provinces. We will, as we proposed in the platform on which we were elected, we will gradually reduce per capita expenditures to be closer to, but still above the national average. And under our plan, we're simply resetting per capita program expenditures to where the NDP was 4 years ago.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, on top of his 14% cut bragging, the Premier now says if his Fantasyland projections don't bear magic fruit, he'll cut even more. Now, 3 days ago, this Premier hid from questions about his cut to supports for 5-year-old children with autism. Now, he'll go to the ends of the earth to protect the $4.7 billion gift he gave to his friends, but he plays on his phone when our kids need help. How many futures will be lost before Alberta's biggest corporations are asked to pay their fair share?
Honestly, I think Albertans deserve better in a leader of the opposition than that kind of, those kind of sneering remarks. Madam Speaker, I never play on my phone. I work on my phone. I reply to urgent emails as the Premier of a province. I don't know what she did, Madam Speaker, except smear and fear and baseless attacks. In terms of spending, Madam Speaker, the gradual reduction in per capita spending will reset it to where it was under the NDP 3 years ago.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, it's true, Madam Speaker. I don't know exactly what he was doing when he was looking at his phone. He just wasn't answering the question. Perhaps today will be different. Yesterday, parents shared a letter they received from an organization called Getting Ready for Inclusion Today, or GRIT. The letter said the government's plan includes, quote, a devastating cut in the per-child funding of 40%. Madam Speaker, this is the real consequence of the cuts that the Minister of Education claims aren't happening. Why won't this Premier direct his minister to be honest about what she's doing, admit that it's wrong, and reverse this heartless attack on children with special needs in this province?
It is that was more of a rant than a question. I don't know, it's not clear to what the member is referring, Madam Speaker, but I will say that we recognize the importance of early childhood intervention. We will continue to have the most generous support for early intervention in Canada. Eligibility for program unit funding, or PUF, has not changed, and the funding cap remains at $25,000. Students with severe learning delays will continue to receive funding at the same level in the future as they do today.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
again, Madam Speaker, the Premier is just not giving us the facts. Now, the letter went on to say, quote, Grit views the new funding model as a return to segregated classrooms where children with disabilities are clustered together. The new funding model is not supported by best practices. Now, to the Premier, why didn't he tell Albertans in the last election that he planned to claw back funding to children with special needs and reverse 20 years of best practices in supporting their futures, all to help pay for his $4.7 billion gift to his corporate friends and insiders?
Hear, hear.
Insiders, Mr. Speaker, 100,000 job creators will benefit from the job creation tax cut, which private sector economists estimate will lead to the creation of 55,000 full-time, high-paying private sector jobs when the NDP proposes, at a time of economic fragility, to punish job creation by raising those taxes. Madam Speaker, under the old models of PUF, students saw a decline in their supports as their education progressed to more challenging levels, but with our changes, we'll close that gap, ensuring that no child will fall through the cracks as they transition from kindergarten to grade 1.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Grit teaches children who have developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, speech delays, behavioral challenges, and vision and hearing loss. But they are not the only service provider whose ability to help our kids is under attack as a result of the cuts. Ultimately, 5-year-old vulnerable children in every part of this province taking that profoundly important step into school will now be left behind thanks to this government's decisions. The Minister of Education won't come clean. The Premier doesn't seem to care. Is there anyone over there who will stand against the immorality of these decisions?
Hey, hey. The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think purposefully misleading Albertans is immoral, and that's what we see from the NDP in this place every single day. Inflicting policies on Albertans that kill tens of thousands of jobs, the carbon tax, higher taxes on employers, driving this province into tens of billions of dollars of debt that will encumber the livelihoods of future generations. That's immoral, Madam Speaker. I can say that we've also, with respect to PUF, matched speech and language funding to actual need, ensuring that students continue to receive the supports they require to succeed. Every student, whether they are in ECS or K-12 education, will receive the supports.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on our third set of questions.
Well, Madam Speaker, hundreds of physicians are writing this government saying that we're on the cusp of a mass exodus of doctors and overwhelmed ERs, all while coronavirus is still spreading. Quote, the house is on fire, Madam Speaker. And how does the Premier respond? He goes on TV and implies these doctors are liars. The Premier accusing others of lying. The irony is rich. Regardless, Premier, on the eve of an epidemic, how many ERs will be thrown into crisis before you call off your attack on health care?
Hey, hey. The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there is just absolutely no end of the depths to which the desperate and divisive NDP will go to frighten people. And it is grossly irresponsible to do that on a matter of public health. We've been briefed by the Chief Medical Officer of Alberta and assured that Alberta is well prepared for any prospective outbreak of coronavirus here. With respect to physician compensation, under the NDP, they merely contributed $5.2 billion to physician compensation. Under this government, that's going up to $5.326 billion for the best compensated physicians whose work we value. They deserve to be compensated fairly and even generously, and that's what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Madam Speaker, the desperation is coming from the doctors who are pleading with this government. You know, this Premier just doesn't grasp the obvious. When there is an epidemic on your doorstep, that is exactly when you don't cut health care, you don't fire nurses, and you don't attack doctors. But today, even another group of emergency room doctors released a letter pleading with this government to stop the attack on preventative care and emergency rooms. Wow. Premier, we are obviously facing a very serious health crisis. Why won't you reverse your attack on doctors and stop the chaos?
Hey. House is on fire.
Madam Speaker, the only chaos we see is the political chaos within that Socialist Party that is still angry with Albertans for firing them. With respect to health care, Madam Speaker, the numbers speak for themselves. There are no health care cuts. Page 126 of the budget before this Assembly had spending for health care at $20.4 billion in 2018, going up to $20.7 billion. Physician compensation going from $5.2 billion up to $5.32 billion. Those are the real hard numbers, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Well, Madam Speaker, the doctors speak for themselves as well. You know, there is no one this Premier will not sacrifice to make sure profitable corporations get their $4.7 billion gift. Not emergency doctors, not nurses, not family doctors, not nurses' aides, not LPNs, not pediatricians, and most importantly, not the people of Alberta who actually need their ERs, their primary care, their public health system working now more than ever. Madam Speaker, for heaven's sake, what will it take for this Premier to stop sacrificing the health care of Albertans?
Yeah. Whoa, whoa. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I joined the Honourable Minister of Health in announcing a $100 billion investment in additional surgical infrastructure to reduce surgical wait times that ran up unbelievably under the NDP, part of a $500 million investment in the Alberta Surgical Initiative. Last week, we joined with MLAs in Red Deer to announce $100 million to upgrade and expand the Red Deer Hospital, something the NDP refused to do. The week before that, we announced $126 million to expand the Peter Lougheed Centre Emergency Ward. Mr. Speaker, this government is investing unlike any government before in our health care.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
The public safety net is under threat. That, Madam Speaker, is the warning from emergency room doctors right here in Edmonton who allege that the chaos created by this government is putting Albertans at risk. They note that the reduced accessibility to primary care through clinics will, and I quote, cripple our emergency rooms. To the Premier, these doctors are just the latest of hundreds across the province to raise these concerns. Are you willing to put patients in harm's way just to force through your chaos-filled agenda?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unlike the NDP, we're putting patients at the centre of the system. We're going to do that by, as we campaigned on, supporting the patient medical home model, by allowing compensation models for our physicians on a contract basis rather than fee-for-service. Because I think, as the letter from those emergency room doctors says, fee-for-service is broken for our family physicians who fall on a fee-for-service basis. So we need to make sure that we are going to provide that stable and predictable funding so they can take the time to be able to serve the patients of Alberta, Mr. Speaker. Or Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
What the letter says, Madam Speaker, is that they want this minister to go back to the table to negotiate on the contract he chose to unilaterally tear up. The letter goes on to state that unnecessary emergency room care comes at a higher cost. The doctors say the inevitable result of the chaos caused by this minister and Premier will be, I quote, reduced quality of care, longer emergency wait times, and an increased taxpayer price. But wait a second, Madam Speaker, I thought their excuse was that this attack on healthcare was going to save money. So to the Premier, what price tag do you put on providing proper patient care, or better yet, what price tag do you consider too high to save someone's life?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, we are spending $5.4 billion on our physician compensation, and we're going to continue to do that. $5.4 billion in physician compensation. Our physicians in this province are the highest paid in the country, and they're going to continue with our new framework. They're going to continue to be among the highest paid in this country. We're going to continue to listen to and meet with and get information from the Alberta Medical Association with this new framework. We're happy to continue to meet with them, and any time that they have any further offer for us, I've instructed the ministry to entertain those, to be able to review those future offers, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Minister, you tore up the contract and you slammed the door. The Edmonton doctors are far from alone, and it's clear that they feel they have to go to the public because you aren't listening. And they've said they are willing to work with your government on a new model if you would come back to the table. The minister, meanwhile, decides to spend his time on Twitter fighting with parody accounts. Surely he could find some better way to spend his time, especially with the chaos he continues to cause. So to this minister, we're coming up to a constituency break. If I was to arrange it myself, would you be willing to meet with me and a group of concerned physicians during the break? Yes or no?
Madam Speaker, first of all, I don't find it funny that when people are scared by misinformation that's spread by a fake account, it's really important for us to be able to correct that misinformation. And that the honourable member thinks that it's funny and perpetuates the misinformation is so irresponsible and not becoming of him, Madam Speaker. And as I've said, my door is open to meet with any physicians in this province, Madam Speaker. I will continue to meet with those physicians. If the honourable member has physicians that he'd like me to meet with, I'm happy to continue to meet with physicians. We are going to continue to meet with and speak with the AMA as well, Madam Speaker, to be able to make sure that my door is always open to physicians and the AMA in this province.
The honourable member for Highwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Over the last few months, the Alberta economy has been under attack by illegal blockades on infrastructure that is critical to the health and sustainability of our economy. We have seen blockades erupt from coast to coast, which has disrupted our ability to export our agriculture products. There's no doubt that these illegal blockades are costing our agriculture sector and economy a great deal. To the Minister, what is the direct impact to Alberta's agriculture sector?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Forestry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And farmers are losing about $9 million a day due to these illegal blockades. That's through cancelled contracts, through ship demurrage at port, and penalties, and just not being able to haul their grain. And while the NDP openly supports their radical good friends and allies like Extinction Rebellion, Shut Down Canada, Direct Action Everywhere, and Lead Now, it's time that we actually, as a government, will stand up to these economic bullies that are trying to inflict so much damage to our economy.
The honourable member for Highwood.
Given that the past year has been incredibly difficult for our agriculture sector due to the, quote, harvest from hell, which has resulted in more than 950,000 acres of unharvested crops, given that the federal Liberal government has forced a carbon tax on farmers that are already strapped for cash, and given that the situation for farmers has only been amplified due to the illegal blockades on our infrastructure, to the Minister, in such a difficult time, what resources are available to farmers and ranchers who are struggling to get by?
Minister of Agriculture and Forestry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And AFSC with the Department of Agriculture and Forestry are working with farmers to see how we can improve our programs that we have. But also, we are continuing to fight the imposition of a carbon tax on Albertans and their farmers. But ultimately, it's sad to see that the NDP again sides with the radical good friends and allies like Extinction Rebellion rather than fight on behalf of Albertans. And actually, I'll quote, Madam Speaker, the member from Lethbridge West not too long ago who co-authored a book that states, "This book draws together a mix of some of the most successful and doable actions taken over recent years from our fund number one."
Member for Highwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given that these illegal blockades have plagued our country and our province over the past few months, which has resulted in mass layoffs, harm to our economy, and damage to our reputation on the national stage, given that our federal Liberal government allowed these illegal blockades to continue for far too long, and given that the Agriculture Advisory Council has recently called for federal and provincial government support, to the Minister, what is being done to ensure that these illegal blockades are addressed and do not continue?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Forestry.
Well, Madam Speaker, our government is taking action. We've introduced Bill 1, which is the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act, and that will actually implement penalties for those that seek to damage or interfere with our critical infrastructure. But just to finish off that quote from the member of Lethbridge West, there was two parts of it that she said it was radical cheerleading was her number 1 recommendation to our very serious number 52, which is blockades. So I wonder if the member from Lethbridge West is still cheerleading the blockades that are happening across Canada.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Madam Speaker, the UCP believes that camping is a luxury that we just cannot afford. They claim that investing in Alberta's world-class parks and campgrounds is throwing money down the drain and not worth the expense. Shame. One thing that this minister doesn't spare any expense on, though, is his long weekend plans. During the last May long weekend, the Minister of Environment and Parks gave the people of Alberta a $7,000 bill for a helicopter tour. Way. Can the minister explain why he gets a helicopter tour while Albertans are being told that their camping trips are an unaffordable luxury?
Good question.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, we're investing in parks, over $86 million this year, Mr. Speaker, and we're proud of that.
That's not a ministerial office expense, helicopters. It's a department expense, Madam Speaker. And let me be very, very clear. The Department of Environment does use helicopters, as does the Department of Forestry and Agriculture. My department is responsible for maintaining and managing areas that are larger than European countries. And my officials do use helicopters. They also use trucks, boats, and sometimes even horses, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy to be out in the field working with them in one of the busiest weekends of the year as they do their important work maintaining our important places.
Here, here. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Goldbar.
Well, Madam Speaker, given that I hope the Ministry of Environment keeps those horses away from the minister, and given that the Albertans in Banff Kananaskis...
You have been talked to about this particular issue. I will ask that you apologize to the Honourable Minister, and then you can start your question again.
I apologize and withdraw. Given that the Albertans in Banff Kananaskis have been told that the cross-country ski trail grooming in Peter Lougheed Provincial Park is, quote, a significant cost, and given that he suggested that this maintenance was not worth the expense, despite the local concerns that this will negatively impact the health, fitness and recreation opportunities of Albertans, and given that the Minister of Environment stuck the people of Alberta with a $7,000 bill for his long weekend joyride, will the Minister commit to repaying the cost of his helicopter joyride before he tells Albertans that their cross-country skiing is a significant cost that we just can't afford?
Hear, hear. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Parks joined a previously scheduled trip by officials to do his job as minister. But Madam Speaker, I don't believe the apology from that member, because he just repeated what he did last week, which was, by implication, to smear this honourable member who had been completely exonerated and apologized to by the RCMP, apologized to by a court, who received a substantial compensation for false allegations that had been made against him. That conduct is beneath any member of this place and is shameful, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Goldbar.
Well, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, if the Premier is mad at me, then I'm doing something right. Given that the Minister also suggested investing in the world-renowned Dinosaur Provincial Park in Drumheller-Stettler is just not worth the expense, and given that Calgary families are speaking out about this cut, claiming that it will ruin their vacation plans, and given that I know the Minister's colleagues are hearing plenty from concerned families right across this province, to the Minister, last chance before you fly off for an eventual constituency week, will you park your heartless, inconsiderate attacks on our parks, yes or no?
Hear, hear. Madam Speaker, you want to talk about heartless and inconsiderate? This member's family went through years of hell based on completely disproven and false allegations from which he was completely exonerated in a court of law. And that member continues to try to drag his family back in to that painful period. Madam Speaker, that is beneath every convention of honor in this place. That member should be ashamed of himself, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, this government's blatant cronyism reached new levels. They appointed Janice McKinnon to the Board of Governors at the University of Alberta. Yes, the very same Janice McKinnon who commissioned a report that is now being used by this Premier to take our province apart. Madam Speaker, Janice McKinnon is just about as progressive as this UCP government. To the Minister, how exactly are the students at the U of A supposed to trust that McKinnon has their interests at heart when she literally vouched for the gutting of their school?
Madam Speaker, Dr. McKinnon was the first female finance minister in Canada, under an NDP government as well, by the way. Dr. McKinnon is one of the most highly regarded Canadian historians, widely published and highly regarded. Dr. McKinnon is a member of the Order of Canada. She is a former chair of the Economic Council of Canada. She is one of the most highly regarded academics in this country, and any university would regard itself as being enormously benefited to have such a person on their board.
Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Well, Given that this minister has now appointed what many see the fox to guard the hen house, and given that students at the U of A are facing tuition hikes of more than 7%, increased costs for residency, increased costs for meal plans, to the minister, do you expect Janice McKinnon to be actually welcome on campus? Perhaps she could hold a town hall for students, look them in the eye, and explain what she's done to them.
Mr. Speaker, was that some kind of a threat from the honourable member opposite for Dr. McKinnon to visit one of our great public universities? Madam Speaker, what this member is doing is trying to sully the name of one of the most respected public servants and academics in this country, who, by the way, spent decades actively in the New Democratic Party. And what he is doing, this is why so many good people are unwilling to put themselves forward for public service. Dr. McKinnon is taking on this appointment with zero compensation, Madam Speaker. That is the essence of public service. Shame on that member for what he's doing.
Honourable members, a point of order is noted at 2:15. The honourable member for Edmonton Northwest.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Certainly Janice McKinnon is no New Democrat of ours. We actually support post-secondary students. And given that the McKinnon report has been used as political cover for our post-secondaries to be cut by almost 20%, Madam Speaker, and given that these cuts to our schools have not of the likes that we have not seen in a generation, NAID and SAIT have already moved to lay off almost 500 staff since this Premier released his broken promise budget. To the minister, do you expect Janice McKinnon will address the staff at the U of A before or after they've been handed their termination papers?
The Honourable Premier.
No, Madam Speaker, we're not going to let that member get away with the fear and smear against a distinguished academic, a distinguished public servant, the first female finance minister in Canadian history, a true trailblazer, a brilliant woman with a PhD in Canadian history, by the way, who has been involved in the administration of major public universities and public budgets. No, Madam Speaker, we will not let the NDP intimidate people from public service to Albertans in positions with zero compensation, in this case, one of the most highly qualified individuals in this country.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the speech from the throne, our government stressed our goals for preserving a high-quality public health care system were to increase patient choice, reduce wait times, and improve health outcomes. In the past few months, there has been much fear and smear around the health care reforms our government will be looking to implement that will come from the recommendations of Ernst & Young. Can the Minister of Health please address, yet again, the two recommendations that are unequivocally off the table? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The EY review that the honourable member mentions confirms the findings of the McKinnon report on Alberta's finances and confirms that Alberta's high spending on health has not led to better outcomes. The report contains 57 recommendations, 72 savings opportunities ranging from 1.5 to 1.9 billion. I want to be clear that there will be no hospital closures or consolidation of the urban trauma centres. And the government is not delisting, is not de-insuring any of the procedures listed on page 79. And every dollar that we save will stay in the health system, Madam Speaker, to improve access and make the system work better for patients.
Honourable member for Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Speaker, given that we have established our government is not closing rural hospitals or adult trauma centres, and given that preserving a high-quality public health care system is essential, and given that underused hospitals lead to inefficient use of staff and facilities, can the Minister of Health please explain how rural hospitals will play a part in reducing surgical wait times within clinically recommended timelines?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Our $100 million investment for the Alberta Surgical Initiative, which we announced yesterday with Premier, will provide additional operating room and acute care capacity across the province. Increasing capacity in rural locations will take the pressure off of larger sites and help people get care closer to home. And this capital investment will help us reach our goals to provide 17,000 more surgeries across Alberta by the end of the next fiscal year, and 80,000 new surgeries in the next 3 years, Madam Speaker.
Good job. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
Madam Speaker, given that our government has committed that Albertans will never have to pay out of pocket for medically necessary care, and given that privately delivered care for minor procedures is already improving wait times in other Canadian jurisdictions, and given that Alberta already contracts out some healthcare delivery such as eye procedures and did so under the previous government as well, can the Minister of Health yet again address how his proposed changes are not leading to the Americanization of our Alberta health system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Despite the NDP's fear and smear campaign, I want to be clear that the $100 million that we announced yesterday in capital funding will go to renovations in AHS-owned facilities. AHS-owned, publicly owned facilities, Madam Speaker. All surgeries will continue to be covered through operating funding from Alberta Health, regardless of where they're performed. We're keeping our platform commitment to drive down surgical wait times with the Alberta Surgical Initiative, and that's exactly what we're going to do, and we're going to put patients at the center of the system, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Another UCP panel produces yet another completely predetermined outcome. The Associate Minister handpicked a group of opponents of supervised consumption. Then he specifically forbade them from considering any of the proven life-saving benefits. But the question is a simple one. Will this government condemn Albertans who use substances to death and condemn their families to grief by cancelling their services or moving them out of reach?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, I think that was a plus for me, maybe. We heard loud and clear at the doorsteps of Alberta families that their communities have been impacted by consumption sites, and we kept our promise to listen to them, Madam Speaker. The panel on the consumption sites heard from over 19,000 Albertans, and whether through an online survey, through the public town halls, through written feedback, through interest group meetings, I thank all Albertans for being able to take the time to meet with that panel and be able to provide their feedback so that we can have some better information on how we can move forward with our consumption sites and provincial oversight over the consumption sites, Madam Speaker.
Well, Member for Edmonton Manning.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Given that one of the many misleading claims in this report is the suggestion that overdose reversal numbers were exaggerated because some Albertans were only being given oxygen. And given the co-chair wouldn't even stand by these claims in her report when under question today, is the Associate Minister and his panel so ignorant of the opiate addictions that they don't understand that stopping breathing is actually what causes the death of a person experiencing an opiate overdose?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, our focus and what we campaigned on was making sure that, unlike the previous government, which had a one-pillar approach that focused entirely on harm reduction, we believe that harm reduction can be a part of the full continuum of care for Albertans who are suffering from addiction, but it's a continuum. And we can't rely on one pillar anymore. We have to be able to include other options throughout the rest of the continuum, Madam Speaker, and also be able to provide recovery options for Albertans who desperately need that help with their addiction, and to be able to make sure that we are spending more to be able to add 4,000 new recovery spaces in Alberta, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given that supervised consumption services are available in 16 cities and 4 provinces outside of Alberta of all political stripes, and given that a return of higher methamphetamine use is a real concern in all communities, and given that Albertans are still using opiates and dying from opiate use every day, is the Premier really going to use the suffering of methamphetamine users as a reason to turn their back on the suffering of opiate users and their families?
Speaker, as I said, we are going to make sure that we are going to have a full continuum of care for Albertans who are suffering from addiction so that we aren't relying on one pillar anymore. We're going to still have harm reduction as a part of that continuum, but that we needed to add other options for families, for communities, for the Alberta patients who are suffering from addiction. And unlike the previous government who ignored the rest of the continuum, we are going to be able to add 4,000 new spaces in this province to be able to help those families, help those patients, and help Albertans who need the recovery, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Budget 2019 was difficult for seniors as they saw the erosion of the Alberta Seniors Benefit, cuts to program funding, elimination of the Seniors Advocate, and a general lack of care for the people who built this province by this UCP government. Sadly, the 2020 broken promise budget makes things even worse for seniors. This government is balancing the budget on the backs of seniors. To the Minister of Seniors and Housing, how can you stand by and do nothing as senior services are dismantled under your watch?
The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me be clear. The change of the Alberta Senior Benefit Program will not affect current seniors. They will continue to receive the same benefits amount that they are currently receiving. However, given our current fiscal situation and the fast-growing seniors population in this country, the current program will not be sustainable for future seniors. In order to make sure that the most vulnerable future seniors are protected, and introducing changes to ASB program.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
So de-indexing the Alberta Seniors Benefit means that every senior that receives it has less in their pockets. Given that this
preamble, Honourable Member.
Given that this UCP government is being reckless with the health of seniors by not funding a transformational, holistic program at SAGE here in Edmonton, and given that the University of Alberta's Faculty of Nursing partners with SAGE to serve seniors with complex needs, where nurse practitioners along with social workers assess and serve seniors in the greater Edmonton area, to the Minister of Health, why is this effective and cost-efficient program being terminated?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, we are going to continue to ensure that we're going to provide the care for our seniors in our communities and in our public hospitals. We're going to ensure that we're spending more than the NDP ever did, more than in the history of this province. We're going to spend more than $20 billion on our healthcare system. We're going to continue to ensure that we're also going to make sure that our drug programs for our seniors are sustainable, Madam Speaker, and we're very proud to support our seniors through the healthcare budget.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Given that SAGE has been forced to send out thousands of letters to patients due to this UCP government's disregard, notifying them that the program will end March 31st, 2020, and given this program reduces costs for the government as it keeps seniors out of hospital, why is the government terminating this program which supports seniors to live well in their communities? Will the minister commit today to reversing these terrible policies and keep SAGE operational?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, as I said, we're going to continue to ensure that we're providing the care in the communities for our seniors, and providing the care for them in the hospitals, Madam Speaker. We're going to continue to ensure that seniors are going to be at the centre, as all patients are going to be at the centre of the system, unlike the NDP who didn't put patients and didn't put seniors at the centre of the system, Madam Speaker. We're going to ensure that patients are at the centre of the system, and we're going to continue to ensure that our programs for our seniors are sustainable for future generations as well.
Hear, hear.
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary-Klein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Alberta's economy has been in a downturn for over 5 years now. The NDP's job-killing carbon tax and their increases to taxes on job creators has caused extensive damage to our economic growth, and it has killed tens of thousands of jobs. Investment fell, companies went elsewhere, and Calgary's downtown emptied. As other jurisdictions with favourable investment climates recruited them, can the Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism tell the House what she is doing to reverse the significant damage that was caused by the previous government?
Corporate giveaways. The Honourable Minister of Economic Trade and Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Technology, for example, is a key element in our economy, and it drives growth in other key sectors such as energy and agriculture. We have tasked an Innovation Capital Working Group with developing ways to attract investment into tech startups, and tech will be a key target sector in our upcoming investment and growth strategy. My colleague, the Minister of Labour and Immigration, is also going to be introducing a foreign graduate startup visa stream to target highly educated grads who want to launch startups in Alberta.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Klein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for her attention to this matter. Given it's unrealistic to expect that the damage that was done by the previous government was fixed, will be fixed overnight, and given that we are still seeing ripples of their absolutely terrible economic policy, and given that the government has gotten to work immediately to improve conditions, and given we are taking action to ensure that our energy sector sees growth, can the Minister tell us what other sectors she is currently working on to help grow our economy? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Our government is taking a multi-pronged, government-wide approach. The Minister of Justice and Solicitor General is standing up for us in the courts. The Minister of Energy has taken numerous steps, with CNRL committing to further development thanks to her changes, along with our job creation tax cut, and CAP predicting billions more in development. This spring, we'll be introducing our investment and growth strategy, which will focus on key sectors in our economy for investment attraction, including the energy sector.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Equine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and again, thank you to the Minister for her dutiful effort to fixing the mess we were left. As has been mentioned, investment has fallen drastically under the previous government. Their 20% increase to taxes on job creators actually brought in less revenue than before, and their government knows best ideology led to bureaucratic log jams and heavy administration. We know that we take a broad-based approach to creating economic growth. Can the Minister tell us what she is doing to grow the economy and how that fits within our strategy of broad-based economic growth?
Broad-based fees.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member. Over the last 10 months, I have met with hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders, businesses, existing and potential investors to identify barriers to investment and promoting Alberta as the best place to invest. Our investment and growth strategy will include an investment agency, which will be a one-stop shop concierge service of government investment attraction efforts that will target key international markets for attracting investment. The party of Extinction Rebellion across the aisle drove billions of dollars of investment out of our province. We'll bring it back.
Honourable members, right now is a great time to remind everyone that we don't use preambles at this part of the question period. Each party in this House got a pass on some of their stuff today, but let's just proceed with no more of that. So, the Honourable Member for Edmonton-Glenora.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Another support this Premier has cruelly cancelled to pay for his $4.7 billion corporate handout is a Regional Collaborative Service Delivery Grant. This grant supported multidisciplinary teams that provide mental health supports, speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, and support for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, and Albertans with visual impediments. Why is the Premier so determined to give billions to billionaires and take away crucial services from Alberta students?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The truth of the matter is that we are maintaining record spending in education. Our new model, in fact, eliminates a lot of red tape, provides school boards with that flexible and predictable funding that they have long called for, and they are excited to start working with it. Thank you.
Good answer.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Glenora.
Given that boards long advocated for adequate sustainable funding, the Premier and his ministers seem to forget that. Given that this Premier is gutting supports for students with special needs who rely on PUF funding, and given that I have been overwhelmed with phone calls and emails and messages from parents who are utterly heartbroken at this government's cruelty, will the minister own her choices today and tell the thousands of parents who have who've been navigating this system for years why she's taking away their child's aid and therapists when they need it the most?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The truth of the matter, the fact of the matter is that the eligibility for the PUF funding has not changed, and the funding cap remains at $25,000. Students with severe learning delays will continue to receive funding at the same level as they do today, period.
Good answer.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Glenora.
Given that I have documents here that I'll table in a few minutes that show that there are some facilities where children are receiving 40% less funding next year because of this minister, given that these are two massive blows to Alberta families of children with special needs, and given I wish I could convey to this minister and the Premier the sheer despair that these parents have communicated to me, given that they ask me, why is she happy to spend $30 million on a joke of a war room and leave large profitable corporations with $4.7 billion more in the bank and laugh all their way to the bank? Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, can the minister tell these parents why she is so cruelly indifferent to the struggles of raising a child with special needs?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry. As a mother of 7 children, a grandmother of 4, and a sister of a brother who was born with Down syndrome, I am very, very compassionate and understand the needs of this particular group. But the truth of the matter is, and while they continue to put misinformation out there, the truth of the matter is that the PUF funding remains at $25,000 for every single student that requires it. Our most severe learning delays will continue to receive the same funding that they do today. I can't say it enough. They will be looked after. It is.
A point of order has been noted at 2:35. The honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 3 questions about Lethbridge today. 42 positions have been eliminated at the University of Lethbridge. One of them is a fellow named Steve, a single dad who's unsure how he's going to provide for his 2 little boys now. And there's more to come for the University of Lethbridge, which is a major employer and an economic driver in Lethbridge. But the cuts are so severe, Madam Speaker, that we know that there are going to be more layoffs in my riding. To the Minister, people are wondering if Lethbridge is bearing the brunt of cuts because they voted NDP. Is revenge and retribution how this minister is making government policy?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Madam Speaker, what a ridiculous question and a ridiculous assertion. Come on, I don't even know where to begin. The fact of the matter is that we are spending more on post-secondary education than comparator provinces, and our outcomes, regrettably, don't appear to be comparable. We look at post-secondary participation rates, despite the fact that we are spending much more than other provinces on post-secondary education. Participation rates have not budged. They are at low levels, 17% for Albertans aged 18 to 35. We can't keep going in the same direction. Madam Speaker, we need to make some changes.
The honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Given, Madam Speaker, that we saw new schools in Calgary, but Southern Alberta did not get any new schools, given that the public system in Lethbridge needs 2 new schools alone, and given that Lethbridge, all told, got almost nothing in this budget, so therefore, given it's no wonder that the city took the unprecedented step of spending $5,000 a month on a lobbyist because our UCP MLA can't get the job done, why is it that this Premier thinks that his Calgary MLAs are more important than his Southern Alberta MLAs?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure exactly where the question is there, but the reality is this. This government inherited a fiscal mess from the NDP members across the floor. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, Albertans elected this government to get our financial house in order, and we are doing just that. We're ensuring that we have presented a credible, realistic budget that will bring the province back to balance and clean up the mess that the NDP members across the way created.
Hear, hear. Honourable Member for Lethbridge West, I just caution your second supplemental in that it is related to your original question. I see your theme is Lethbridge, but that might not be good enough. So a point of order has been noted at 2:37. The Honourable Member for Lethbridge West.
Given that I was elected to represent a city, and that is exactly what I'm doing, Madam Speaker, given that Lethbridge is not getting the replacement of a 50-year-old bridge that the Premier promised during the campaign, and given that the policies of our new infrastructure minister mean that the local Lethbridge construction companies could not bid on new schools even if we were getting them, something the Lethbridge Construction Association has been critical of, and given the past head of the Lethbridge Construction Association was the member for Lethbridge East, Is it now this government's policy that capital plan decisions are made by ministers who don't feel the need to listen to the local voices that they've sidelined to the backbenches?
The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, if the member can look into the budget and look at the capital plan spending, it is unprecedented. We're spending $6.9 billion across the province, building big and beautiful schools better than NDP. So it's a shame. So they chose International Women's Day to attack Janice McKinnon, and it's a shame on you.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last month, the Minister of Community and Social Services announced a change to the date for the payments of the assured income for the severely handicapped and income support programs. As we know, many vulnerable Albertans and their dependents rely on these programs every month to meet their financial needs. And this includes many of my constituents in Spruce Grove and Stony Plain. Can the Minister please provide an update to the House about how the benefit payment process occurred for March of 2020?
The Honourable Minister of Community and Social Services.
Madam Speaker, thank you to the member for his question and for his commitment to the vulnerable in his community. This MLA is well known for holding myself and my cabinet colleagues to account, and we all encourage it. Our government knows how important income support and AISH benefits are for Albertans who rely on them. Starting March 2020, the monthly payment date for AISH and income support was changed to the first of the month to provide more consistency. The March 2020 payment run occurred as scheduled on February 28th, with outcomes typical to what we normally see every month.
The Honourable Member for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the Minister for her answer. Given that, according to your department, the caseload for the AISH program is currently over 68,000 people, and for the income support program is over 60,000, and given that these programs are often the main or only income these Albertans receive, as many residents of Spruce Grove and Stony Plain have informed me, can you please provide us with an update for the other individuals on the program who also receive monthly support?
The Honourable Minister of Community and Social Services.
Thank you for that question. Madam Speaker, I can confirm the following for the February 28th payment breakdown. It's important to note that every month we have new clients coming into the program and clients going out of the programs. In terms of numbers, over 98% of the 107,000 payments that went to clients on Friday were direct deposits. About 13,000 other payments were made by check. Of the check payments, almost 12,000 were sent to a third party. This might include a landlord or a utility provider or anyone else that the client consented to release a portion of their payment to.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. Given that many people have reached out to my office worried about the disruption of the changes to their ability to pay bills on time, and given that some recipients of AISH will need additional help changing their billing cycles to conform to the new schedule, would the Minister please provide us with an update on her actions taken so far to ensure that this change in the payment date is occurring smoothly and with minimal impact on clients?
The Honourable Minister of Community and Social Services.
Madam Speaker, it's my priority to ensure minimal disruption for our vulnerable clients. I have asked for a daily update from my department. As of March 4th, the calls received on the day of the payment and the days following were similar to the calls received in previous months. In fact, while we have received 42 more calls about AISH this month, 329 this month, and 287 last month, we received 87 fewer callers about income support. As you know, the payment date changed every month previously. This month was no different, and the system performed exactly as it typically does. We're monitoring the situation closely and have worked hard to prevent negative consequences from the date change. I would also like to add to any members of this House who have received questions or concerns.
Your time is up. We will proceed with the rest of routine here in 30 seconds.